I'm joined here by Pierre Nanterme. He is Chairman and CEO of Accenture, the global company, really, that is consulting, but so much more. So welcome, Pierre. Great to have you at Bloomberg.
Good to be here.
One of the things we hear from every single company we talk to is digital transformation. Everyone's going through some version of that in some way. You're in an unusual situation in that your company, Accenture, has been going through that and advising other companies how to do it. What have you learned from your experience that you can apply to your clients?
I mean, indeed, this is very true. And by the way, a lot of CEOs are calling me to share my experience in terms of digital transformation because we started in 2012, so a bit ahead of anyone else. When I look at what has been for us very important, first you need to be extremely deliberate and set stretch goals. For us, we wanted to have more than 60 or 70% of our revenues by 2020 in the new, coming from less than 10%. So we set a very high bar. I mean, second, it's important to do your digital transformation across your different businesses. What would be, I guess, inappropriate would be to set the digital part in a kind of factory, where there is the good digital part and the bad core, which is wrong from my perspective, and you need to get the digital transformation pervasive across the different business units. And finally, it's all about alignment. If you want to drive the digital transformation, you need to align first your leadership, your board, so at the top of the house, so they understand what's going to be the game. You need then to align your people, a lot of communication, a lot of motivation and explanation, and align your investments. So for us, we put 100% of our investments behind our transformation and not spread your investment across too many things.
So you started by saying deliberate in forming your strategy. How does one be deliberate in this world that is changing so fast? I mean, every time we open up the newspaper, there's some different digital gizmo available to us, some different way of approaching it. Don't you have to adjust a fair amount along the way?
I mean, you need to adjust, but by deliberate, I mean you need to understand where you are. For instance, if I'm taking professional services, part of our industry was commoditizing quite rapidly in terms of services. And I'm thinking about the offshoring or some type of technology work. So what we figure out is what it is, in what kind of business we want to be. We don't want to be in any commoditizing business, which is the case for all the industries, and we want to pivot to high growth, high value areas. Then we selected very deliberately these areas: interactive, mobility, analytics, cloud, security, and we pivot all our investment, all our skills, all our strategies behind these 5 digital capabilities. And then you need to navigate, because the art of leadership for a CEO is navigating around the block. So understanding which technology are ready for what I would call prime time. And so you need to invest here and now and take the benefits, and which technologies going to come in 1 year or in 2 years. And this is where we are advising our clients.
So you used a key word, invest. How do you make sure it's an investment rather than a cost? And go back to something you touched upon, actually, with commoditizing. There's a lot of companies that say, why don't we find some very inexpensive programmers in Eastern Europe, in Asia, someplace like that? Is that a wrong approach?
It has been a good approach, and certainly the name of the game between 2000 and 2010. But then at some point in time, it's going to be hard to find cheaper people, if you will. The labor arbitrage will get to a limit. So when you're getting to a limit in terms of labor arbitrage, what it is you're looking for? Productivity from technology, which is going to be much more sustainable and much more robust over a cycle. So now it's less about labor arbitrage. It's much more around productivity, efficiency, which is going to be brought by robotic, automation, artificial intelligence.
Well, exactly. How do you say to a CEO, and how did you make sure it was true for you, that investing all this money, because it's expensive, it's not cheap to go digital, will actually be an investment in increased productivity, reduced costs, or increased sales? Because that's, after all, you have to have some combination of that to be successful.
Yeah. First, you need to have clear performance and measurement system. So at Accenture, we measure everything. We measure the return, the investment we are making, and are we making good money out of it. And then second, it is extraordinarily important to be selective in the investment you're making. So you need to look at the opportunities, if you will, and then understand what we're calling the brilliant basics. The kind of technologies you need to apply here and now because they are proven. Robotic process automation is part of this. in interactive experience, website improvement, e-commerce. You have some proven technologies that are going to drive revenue up and cost down. And then you have the more pioneering, leading edge, cutting edge. And this is where you need to be extremely thoughtful. Certainly work with people like us or others in order to understand where these technologies are going to be mature enough to drive the benefit you expect.
So thoughtful and selective, two words that you used there. Talk about Accenture for a moment, because you invest a fair amount. You're not sheepish about making investments. As I understand, a few years ago, you, for example, embraced the cloud. Turns out you were right. You were ahead of other people there. Right now, you're going big in artificial intelligence, for example. How do you pick the right things to bet on so that you're right? Because you can easily invest in something like that, and it ends up the way of an 8-track stereo.
Yeah, I mean, we have significantly uplifted our research and development department, led by Paul Doherty, our Chief Technology and Information Officer, and on the other hand, Omar Abosh, our Chief Strategy Officer. They're working together in understanding what are these opportunities. And then and we're investing $700 million in R&D. Only.
$700 million.
$700 million in research and development. The job of these guys is to understand these technologies and how they're going to impact the business moving forward. And then we are incubating. We are trying to find a use case, because you have a lot of technologies when you don't have still a business use case, because they are not prepared or ready or scalable or having the right or reliable. So this is what we've been doing when we selected all the interactive. We created Accenture Interactive, which is going to be well about $6 billion. And in 7 years, we created the largest digital experience agency in the world. So by being very selective. The same with the cloud, the same with the cybersecurity, and the same with applied intelligence and analytics. And now what we are doing is already anticipating the next wave. So we are incubating technologies such as blockchain, immersive realities, quantum computing. We think they are not yet ready for the big scale game, but probably in the coming 2 or 3 years, they're going to be very important. So it's about being extraordinarily focused, extraordinarily selective, and be a bit programmatic around the deployment of these new technologies.
So take all of that you've done at Accenture. How is it translated into benefits to your company and your shareholders? And how do you measure it? Do you look at revenue? Do you look at profits? How do you measure it?
We have a very clear financial roadmap we are sharing with the analysts. I had my investor day this morning, and we've been sharing, which is first, we want to grow our revenues more than the market, so gaining market share. Our growth, if you look at the CAGR over these last years, in the range of 9% local currency, 7 organic, 2 inorganic, consistently. So we've probably been growing more, 3 times the market than anything else. Second is indeed the return. We want to expand our margin while keeping enough money to invest in the business. So we're returning with a modest margin expansion, and we reinvest in the business. And then we are returning a lot to our shareholders in form of dividend and share buyback. So all of this is extraordinarily transparent. We are sharing that with our investors. And I guess so far our investors have been pretty pleased.
I should say so. Okay, Pierre Nanterme, really great to be with you. He's the chairman and the CEO of Accenture.